Last night, I got a message that no one ever wants to get. I was lying in bed with my wife, falling asleep, when my wife decided to check her messages before bed, and she got a message from one of our relatives saying that my mom had been hit by a truck. She's in the hospital, but they didn't know any other details. So immediately, a lot of things go through your mind, and you want to assume the worst as your natural instinct, but as a person of faith, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I'm not going to assume the worst case scenario, even though that might be your natural instinct. I'm not going to say any negative words. Immediately, my wife led a prayer for my mother, praying for the best possible outcome. And we immediately called my dad then on Skype. And my dad's in his 70s. He's not very tech savvy at those kinds of things. So we ended up Skype calling our friend Tom, who you've seen in some of our videos in Bismarck. You saw when he came and visited in the Philippines. And thankfully, Tom was at the hospital with my mom and dad, so we were able to get the information from them.
Okay, here she is. She's been drugged up. Wish you did have done that for me.
Hi.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Oh, I don't feel good. Hi, Cade.
Hey.
Wait. I was crossing the street and he just hit me. And I just laid there. It hurt so bad.
I guess she was crossing the street and the guy was making a left turn and he ran into her with a pickup. Now, the guy that ran into her, his wife called me. First of all, I was sitting at home and I get this call saying it was the police department. Guy says, has anybody notified you yet? And I said, notified me? About what? Then they said, well, your wife was down walking on 33rd Street and got run over by a pickup. And they took, and they, well, got hit by a pickup, whatever. And they said she was conscious, but they took her to Sanford Hospital here. He told me to come down here. He was wanting some information, but I didn't know what all because I didn't know anything about it. He was probably trying to finish his accident report. And so anyways, I came down here and found her down here. You know who her trauma doctor was? Her trauma doctor was Caden Hintz.
Oh,
Caden, who wrestled with you, one of the Magnificent Seven that won the state championship. That's his trauma, one of your fellow teammate wrestlers. And the guy who hit you, his wife, the guy that hit her,
yeah.
His wife called me. I got this phone call. I went home from here to try to call people to get a hold of Justin and Tom, because in here they said there's so much Schmidt and that a lot of people's cell phones don't work. I couldn't get this phone working, so I had to move the car because I was parked on the street. So I went home and I said I'd try to call people. I tried getting a hold of Dennis. I had to leave a message, and I couldn't get a hold of Alex and that. I finally went over to Sullivan's. Well, the way that happened, I got it from this woman called me and she says, is Diane home yet? And I said, no. And I said, I'm not having much luck. I said, I'm trying to get a hold of people. I said, somebody ran my wife down in a pickup. And she said, yeah, that was my husband. I felt kind of stupid then. Anyways, she said, because she told her husband she knew Diane when, he gave her the name when he went home and said what happened. And anyways, she said that she knew you. She said, yeah, we know Travis. She said, our son wrestled with him. She said she thinks he was a year older. Here's a weird thing. The guy who ran you down is the dad of somebody that wrestled for Bismarck High and knows you. Her trauma doctor was Caden Hintz, and her nurse is a girl named Kraft from Strasbourg. Her trauma nurse her name is Kraft, and she's from Strasbourg. And she was telling us, she says to me, you look familiar. Well, because she saw your Strasbourg video. She had watched your Strasbourg video. But we might be related somehow to the nurse, because if she's a Kraft from Strasbourg, we might be distant cousins or something. So that's kind of weird, all of this. people knowing all this stuff.
Now, first off, we're so grateful that it could have been a lot worse. What happened is obviously not good, especially to a senior citizen getting these kinds of fractures, but we're so thankful that the worst case scenario didn't happen, and we're so glad that we didn't just jump to that conclusion and start giving into all these negative thoughts. But if you want to say a prayer for my mom for a speedy and full recovery, we'd really appreciate it. But this got me thinking about a lot of other things. This is my mom's first year of retirement, and it's like, gee, you work all your life, and then in your first year of retirement, when you're supposed to really be enjoying your life, you end up getting hit by a truck. Now, thankfully, my mom didn't die, and I think she's going to be totally okay, but she could not be just as easily. And there's so many people that go through life and they say, well, I'm going to enjoy myself while I'm retired, or I'm going to enjoy myself when I have whatever, or I'm going to start enjoying myself when I move to the Philippines. In my book, I wrote, one of the key points in my book was, you can't wait until you move to the Philippines to start enjoying yourself, to start enjoying life. You got to start doing it now. You got to find a way to do that. And something in my own life, I've been a little bit underemployed lately, and I was just feeling like kind of almost like a bum the other day. But at the same time, it's been one of the greatest blessings in life, because this has been maybe the happiest time of my life, because I have this guy, my newborn son, I have my wife, and I've just been able to spend this time with my wife and son, and I've been so thankful for it. I've been so happy. And it's like, well, if this would have happened to me, if I'd been slaving away, trying to work constantly, and then I go out and I get hit by a truck and die, well, it would have all been for a waste, basically. And I wouldn't be able to get that time back with my family, that precious time. And number two, this got me really thinking about family, and I think about family a lot these days. You often do when you get a bit older, and definitely get my relationship growing with my wife over the years, and she's brought me closer to my family. And now, not just being married to my wife, but since we had this guy transformed us from being a couple to actually being a family. But I was thinking about my mom getting hit by this truck, and she hasn't even met this guy yet. She hasn't gotten to meet her new grandson yet. And it would be a real tragedy if it happened that she didn't get to. My dad hasn't met him yet. Thankfully, my parents came over to the Philippines before this happened and got to spend some quality time with us, and quality time while Imabel was pregnant, and got to share a lot of that experience with us. But your relationships with your family and friends, but really mostly your family, that's really the most important thing in life, far more than any kind of money or your career that we're told is supposed to fulfill us. I know a lot of very successful career people, and they end up feeling very unfulfilled and not happy. And I think he's agreeing with me. But these are things that have been on my mind. I'm just thankful that things could have been a lot worse, and they aren't for my mom. But keep these points in mind with you, that we only have a finite time, and life is precious, especially watching my parents get older. It's kind of hard to do, and it's hard to think about that's going to be me someday. You know, there's guys like my grandfather who's currently 95 years old, and he just seems like he's going to live forever. But that's not most people, and eventually my grandpa's going to die himself, so I have to try and find a way to spend time with them and cherish the time that we've spent together, and then focus on what's most important, which is our family, time with my wife, time with my child, time with my mom and dad. They haven't been able to meet this guy yet, unfortunately, but we're going to have to remedy that. So those are just a couple quick thoughts. So I'll get back to taking care of this guy, but if you want to drop a prayer for my mom for a speedy and full recovery, we'd really appreciate it.